This video will talk about the technique of dimensionality reduction. So the issue is that a lot of the most interesting applications and data sets that we might encounter in machine learning involve data that lives in a very high dimensional space, okay? And you might be thinking that the application that you have in mind isn't so high dimensional, but I just want to give you a quick example to show that even a pretty simple scenario can end up pushing you into a very high dimension. So consider an image that's 1,000 pixels wide and 800 pixels tall. This isn't a very large image by modern standards, but there are 800,000 pixels, so it lives in an 800,000 dimensional space. Okay? And what can happen is that we may not have that many examples. We might have a lot of examples, but maybe not 800,000 or 80 million. And so we might have fewer examples n than the dimension d of our data set. And then what can happen is we might end up overfitting the data. So maybe we have a classifier and it reads into the specific examples that we have too much and we don't do as well as we could. So what we'd like to do, ideally, is find some kind of lower dimensional representation of our data set, right? And at the same time, preserve the important relationships between the examples, right? So maybe in some example, maybe we have cat images and dog images living in this high dimensional space. I want to push them down into a lower dimensional space that still maintains some distance between the cat and dog images so that we can still classify them successfully. Overall, this is an unsupervised learning problem because I'm just trying to learn a transform. I don't necessarily want to do any kind of classification or regression, but this can be an important building block towards a supervised learning solution. Okay, so we're going to focus in this video primarily or exclusively really on principal component analysis. And this is one of the most simple and popular methods. Basically, what we're going to be doing is looking for a coordinate transform, a linear transformation that rotates our coordinate system into one where we can preserve most of the energy of the signal by maintaining just a few coordinates. And we're going to see specifically what that means. To do that, we need to recall a few properties of covariance matrices. Okay, so remember the covariance matrix of a random vector x is just this outer product of x minus its expectation with itself minus its expectation. Okay, so we've seen this before. So it's just this matrix of covariances and variances. And this turns out to be a positive semi-definite matrix. So it's symmetric, positive semi-definite. That gives us a lot of interesting properties. One of those is that all of its eigenvalues turn out to be real and non-negative. All right. So in general, eigenvalues can be complex, but here they're real and non-negative. And using this fact, we can actually just sort them. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to sort them along with the corresponding eigenvectors. So we're going to index them into descending order. So lambda 1 is going to be largest and lambda d, so we're assuming we're in a d-dimensional space, is going to be the smallest eigenvalue, and the smallest they can get is 0. Okay, so I assume that we've pre-sorted them in this order for the whole video. And it turns out that the other property is that all of the eigenvectors of this covariance matrix are orthonormal to each other, meaning that if you give me two eigenvectors, right, so let's v1 through vd be the eigenvectors, and if I take the inner product of two eigenvectors, I get 1 if it's the inner product of an eigenvector with itself, so vi transpose vi, and 0 otherwise, so vi transpose vj. So basically the eigenvectors form a kind of coordinate system for us. And so what I can do is collect these eigenvectors into a matrix V, so this eigenvector matrix, and I can also collect the eigenvalues into a diagonal matrix, lambda, so it has the eigenvalues along the diagonal and everything else is 0. And then with both of these things in hand, I can write this thing which I call an eigendecomposition, which is that I decompose the covariance matrix as V times lambda times V transpose. Okay, and it turns out that this V matrix of eigenvectors has a nice property that its transpose is its inverse, meaning that V transpose times V is equal to the identity matrix, which is the same as V times V transpose. Okay, meaning so another way of saying this is that it's an orthogonal matrix. And these properties are really useful. We're going to see exactly why. And they also hold for sample covariance matrices. So they don't just have to hold for a covariance matrix derived from a PMF or a PDF. You could also get it from a sample covariance matrix that you just derive from your data. All right. So what can we do? Well, let's say I have a random vector x. It has a mean vector mu, and it has a covariance matrix sigma. Okay? I'm going to carry out the following coordinate transformation. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to center the distribution at the origin. So I'm going to remove the mean, subtract the mean out. I'm going to get this centered random vector that now has mean vector 0. Now I'm going to rotate the coordinate system by multiplying by the orthogonal matrix of eigenvectors. So this is really just changing the coordinate system from our basic Cartesian coordinate system into a new coordinate system whose axes are given by the eigenvectors. So the way that I do that is I have z, which is v transpose times my centered random vector, or just x minus its mean. Turns out after I do this, the entries of z turn out to be orthogonal with or uncorrelated with each other. So the covariance of zi and zj is always 0 if I is not equal to j, and that means that there's no redundancy between these transformed features. Okay, so in my original feature space x, there might be a lot of correlation between neighboring pixels, right? Or other things like height and weight might be very correlated, but once I've made this transformation, they will become uncorrelated. And the reason I also said orthogonal is that a while back we talked about this definition of orthogonality for random variables. Since here I have mean 0, they'll also be orthogonal random variables, but we won't mention that directly. So the variances also turn out to be equal to the eigenvalues. So the variance of zi is just lambda I. Okay, so the covariance matrix here, I can just use this formula that we had for the covariance of a linear transform. And my linear transform was just V transpose, right? So I used V transpose. So then I get the covariance matrix is going to be V transpose times sigma of x times V, right? And so I end up with something that looks like V transpose times V, that's the identity, and another V transpose times V, and that's the identity. And those just go away, and I'm left with lambda, this diagonal matrix. That's another way of saying these entries are uncorrelated, because if their covariance matrix is diagonal, then the only things that have positive value in that covariance matrix are the variances, and everything else, the covariances, are just 0. As a final step, what I'll do is if I want to reduce the dimension from d down to k, I will just throw out everything except the top k elements of this vector z. Okay, so in that way, I now have k uncorrelated features, and the variance of those features is lambda 1 through lambda k. And since lambda 1 through lambda d were sorted so that lambda 1 was the largest down to lambda d the smallest, I've retained the highest variance components in this new coordinate system. Okay, so I've done my best to maintain the most energy I can about my signal while maintaining a linear representation. Okay, well, principal component analysis is basically the same thing. Okay, it follows the same basic steps, except the only difference is that we're dealing with real data, right? So we need to estimate the mean vector and the covariance matrix from our data. So I'm not necessarily going to be given those quantities, so I need to take my examples, and usually this is just my training data if I'm in a supervised learning problem, or anything else. So I just have some data set, and I'm trying to learn those two parameters. Okay, so the way that I'll do this is usually I'll collect my n d-dimensional examples into an n by d data matrix. Okay, the way that I'll do that is I'll transpose each vector so that the example index is on the rows and the feature index, so the dimensions, is on the columns. All right, this is a standard way of writing this. In this way, I can write the mean vector, the sample mean vector, mu hat, as just the average of these vectors. And writing this using this matrix format, I write as X transpose this data matrix times this all ones vector. Okay, and this all ones vector throughout this video, we're just assuming is always sized correctly. In this case, it has dimension n, but in other places it might need to have a slightly different dimension to make sense. All it does is just collapse those rows together, sum them all up. You can convince yourself that's the operation that's happening. And I'm just left with the thing that I want. All right, so next I'm going to center the data. So what I was doing before, remember, was just subtracting the mean vector. I can do the same thing here. In terms of my data matrix, I just subtract the transpose of my mean vector to fit the fact that my examples were transposed, and I use the all ones vector to just copy that n times. So I have n copies of that mean vector to subtract. Okay, and the next thing I need to do is compute the sample covariance matrix. And the way that I do that is just like we've been doing for the sample variance. I just take the sum of x minus the sample mean times x minus the sample mean transpose, and I normalize by 1 over n minus 1. Okay, and that's just to make sure this is an unbiased estimator. To write this in terms of the centered version, I don't need to write the subtraction by the mean because that's already happened. And to write this in terms of the data matrix minus the mean vector times 1 vector, I can write it like this. And then finally, the simplest way to write this is just 1 over n minus 1, the centered data matrix transpose times the centered data matrix. So I can just have a very simple representation of this sample covariance. And once I have that, just as before, I compute the eigen decomposition, right? So I take my sample covariance matrix, I get V lambda V transpose, where V is an orthogonal matrix of eigenvectors, and lambda is a diagonal matrix of eigenvalues. So let's visualize what we're going to do with this. So I want to do principal component analysis. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to get a data set. All right, here's a two-dimensional visualization of a data set. So I get these two-dimensional feature vectors. I'm going to compute the sample mean vector. So let's do that. Here's the sample mean vector. And I'm also going to compute the sample covariance matrix. I'm going to visualize this using these kinds of ellipses here, just to show that maybe there's some energy kind of going, up into the right. And this is basically like the contour plot you would expect to see for a joint Gaussian with that covariance matrix. Okay, I'm just doing this so that you can see some picture for the sample covariance matrix. Okay, and what we're going to do from that is compute the eigen decomposition. So I just take my sample covariance and break it into this eigen vector matrix and this eigenvalue diagonal matrix. And I'm going to throw out everything except the first k eigenvectors. So I have vk, which only keeps the first k columns in this v. It doesn't keep all the way up to d. Okay, in the second plot, which I've just revealed, I'm now going to transform the data according to the center and then rotate process that we had before. Okay, so first I'm going to center the data by subtracting the mean vector from every point. So here it goes. So now it's centered at the origin. Okay, now I'm going to project onto this new coordinate system. And the way that I do that is just multiply by vk. So this new coordinate system matches what I had from this covariance matrix, right? And so I have these vectors which are along the axes of this ellipse. And what I'm going to do is project onto the dimension that I'm going to keep. In this case, because I start with 2 dimensions, the only way to really go down in an interesting way is to go down to 1 dimension. So I'm only keeping V1, which is along the principal dimension, the one with a larger eigenvalue. And you can see that because that contour plot was more stretched out, so it had more energy in the top right direction. So I'm projecting and onto this, which means I'm only going to keep the coordinate of my example on V1. I'm not going to keep the information about how high it is with respect to V2. Okay, so that's what I'm visualizing here. So these points are all kind of falling down onto this V1 axis, and I'm forgetting about what the V2 axis looks like. Okay, so what their representation was there goes away, and I get these green points, which is going to be my transform data Z. And now just to visualize that, I just throw that out, and I'm left with now this one-dimensional data set, whereas I started with a two-dimensional data set. Okay, and so that's it. I now have a k-dimensional representation of my original d-dimensional data set X. So I started in blue in d dimensions, which was 2, and I went down into green, which was k equals 1 dimension here. So why do I want to do this? Well, one very important reason to do PCA is that I want to visualize a very high dimensional data set. And the only way I really have to visualize it using my human visual system is to go to 2 or 3 dimensions. So maybe I have a lot of weather data that I've collected, or maybe I have a lot of biomedical data that I've collected, which has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dimensions, and I want to just get a quick view of what's important. I can just run PCA and get a quick visualization. That's a really important use of it, just visualizing and exploring data sets. Another application, which we're going to use directly, is as a pre-processing step, okay, for supervised learning. I mentioned that PCA is an unsupervised learning technique, but you can use it in supervised learning as a step in your pipeline to avoid overfitting. You can also use it for learning distributions parametrically. So if you're trying to fit a distribution to a data set, it can also help you to drop down to a lower dimension to avoid overfitting there as well. But let's focus on supervised learning, and keep in mind, just as an example in your head, maybe this is about trying to learn a good classifier in supervised learning to tell pluses from minuses. So the way that this works is that I'm going to have a training and a test set. I'm going to estimate the sample mean vector and covariance matrix only from the training data. Okay, so let's just write that out. I have my mu hat, which I estimate only from the training data, and my sample covariance matrix sigma hat, which I estimate only from the training data matrix. Okay, so this is just what we were doing before, except now I use X train instead of X. I compute the eigendecomposition, just as before. I get V lambda V transpose, and I keep only the first K column, so I only keep K dimensions. And then I'm going to take the training data and the test data and then center and project them. So I'm going to, from the training data, subtract the mean and project by V. Same for the test data. And so the interesting thing here is for the test data, I'm not recomputing the mean vector and covariance matrix. I'm using the versions that I got from the training data. All right. And maybe one reason to think about that is that maybe I'm getting each test example one at a time. Then there would really be nothing to compute. But this is kind of a standard way to do it, to kind of build the whole dimensionality reduction process just from the training data. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is take the reduced training data and treat this as my data set, as my features. And I'm going to use my original labels, ytrain, and those are going to get fed into my algorithm. So if my algorithm, such as a classifier, was having trouble in D dimensions, maybe D was 800,000, I could drop it to K equals 50 dimensions and see how it does there. I'll test it. So I'll have now a classifier that only works in K dimensions, not D dimensions. So I have to use my reduced test data matrix to feed into that classifier. I can't use the original test data matrix because it's not the right dimension. And I'll just compare it to the original test labels. And so this is a really important step in a lot of different pipelines. And I think the best way to get some understanding of it is just to play with it and build intuition on your own.